Well, let's analyse the military side of this. And joining me now is former Director General of the Ministry of Defence, Rear Admiral Chris Parry. Chris, normally, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Normally, when there's a major announcement, it's been leaked, it's been trailed, everyone's ready for it, and it doesn't come as a surprise. As far as I mean, maybe you know different. As far as I'm concerned, this came completely out of left field last night.
I think it reflects the very special relationship that exists between the governments of the United States, the United Kingdom and Australia. And I think it's been brewing for a while. And we've got to recognise the very close relationship that exists between the navies. Now, the Australians have been looking for a suitable submarine since about 2007 and haven't really got it right. And you're quite right. The sort of submarines they were looking at weren't right for what they wanted.
60-year-old technology.
Yeah, but they're quite good submarines. I mean, the short-fin Barracudas are good conventional submarines. But we've got to look at the distances in the Asia-Pacific. Australia's a long way from anywhere, and most of their areas of interest are out in the Pacific. They also recognise that the Chinese Navy is getting more and more competent at anti-submarine warfare. They can flood most of the South China Sea with aircraft and ships, and so you need a sophisticated battle-winning platform, and that's the nuclear submarine.
Which can dive deep and stay deep for months at a time.
And it can, as long as the food supplies are there. You can stay underwater, you don't have to break surface. And let's take us back 40 years. The Argentinians at the end of the Falklands crisis said, the British nuclear submarines represented a threat with which we cannot cope. And that is the same is true today.
I mean, they're clearly an absolutely vital strategic weapon. Chris, none of the leaders mentioned China when they talked about this, but let's not kid ourselves. We've seen in the South China Sea a series of contested island territories on which the Chinese have built airstrips. No wonder that Japan and other countries in that area have welcomed this deal because we've seen a massive naval build-up. Just give the audience some idea of how big the Chinese naval build-up is.
I will do that, Nigel. But before I do that, what we have to recognise is the world is actually splitting into two blocks. It's not just China. It's their fellow Eurasian autocrats with whom they're actually allied at the moment, Russia and Iran. And what we're seeing is the formation of the maritime democracies acting together. And the tip of the spear is this US, Australian, UK partnership. But it does include Japan. It will include New Zealand, Singapore, Malaysia, probably India as well. And what we're saying is you might dominate the Eurasian continent, but you're not going to dominate the world ocean, because that's where we see basically the connections between raw materials, manufacturers and markets. It's been like that for hundreds of years. Now, what China has realised is if it's dominating Eurasia, it needs to dominate the seas around Eurasia if the Belt and Road Initiative is to be successful. So it's built up a very large navy in a very short time. It's got some very powerful cruisers and destroyers. It's about to launch its third aircraft carrier. It's developed its own nuclear submarines, but I have to say they're very noisy, so you can hear them from a long way away.
Well, that's a good thing.
Fantastic. And given that our Astutes are probably the quietest, best submarines in the world, that's very good for Australia.
I was told, Chris, that the speed of build-up of the Chinese Navy was the equivalent to the entire size of the Royal Navy every year. I don't know whether that's exaggeration, but this is now a vast navy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. In terms of numbers, they've got far more than the United States have. There is a slight issue. They've had a surplus of steel and they've had a surplus of shipbuilding capacity, so they've been really churning them out for economic reasons and to keep people employed. Whether they can man them and operate them is a totally different matter. And the United States will tell you that looking at some of the exercises in which they've been involved, they're learning. They're learning fast, they're copying what we do, but they themselves will want to test themselves. That's the key point. There are echoes here for the German Imperial Navy before World War I. So how good are we?
No, absolutely. The German Navy building and crowds protesting outside Number 10. We want 8 and we won't wait. New dreadnoughts. And that was the precursor to World War I. What we're hoping, of course, here is that the fact we've got this pact is going to be a deterrent on China perhaps launching an incursion into Taiwan. Is this, Chris, and this is the last question I'm going to ask you, but it's a big question. NATO did its job. It was set up for a purpose. It did its job. NATO is not the organisation to confront the Chinese threat, is it?
Well, NATO, believe it or not, is still pretty flexible. We've still got Russia, of course, around Europe in the North Atlantic to deal with. So NATO is going to be pretty good for defending the territory of its members. There's no question about that.
But I meant in the South China Sea.
But we're going to have a series of overlapping organisations now, which incorporate the previous ones, like the Five Eyes, the Five Power defence arrangements, and probably a loose alliance of Southeast Asian states as well. But they need the stiffening, if you like, of the Australian, UK and US alliance to be there on the ground. What I liken it to very much is the sheriff saying, look, I'm forming a posse here. I'm handing out the badges. We need to contain a threat, deal with basically what is a threat to the international rules-based system. Come and help us. And at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. Weakness is a provocation. And unless we can match force for force, then the Chinese will think that they can take advantage of that and maybe...
So this is a good deal, yeah?
Yeah, it's a very good deal. And I think strategically it's thrown China off balance, which is always a good thing.
Because they were surprised, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they will have to react in the face of something we've acted about, which is great.
Thank you for joining us. That was Rear Admiral Chris Parry. Now,